Hey you guys, welcome back to another tutorial. In this tutorial, I'm going to talk about the lilac point Siamese, the lighter Siamese, the one in the middle in this painting, and how I created those soft fur textures. I didn't have to paint the eye because the cat is sleeping, so I won't include anything about painting eyes, but it'll be a lot of information about fur and the colors I used, and just in general how I tied the cat into the rest of the painting. And here's the before and after shot so you can see where we're headed. This cat has very subtle markings, so I think I'm going to use quite a bit of water in his face just so I make sure that I get all those subtle markings that kind of blend together. He's got some browns and some blues, gray blues in his coat on his face, so I think what I will do first is get my fur brush. I've talked about this fur brush a lot in other videos. I think this is a Royal and Langnickel. They call these wisp brushes. It says 1/2 inch on it, so that's the size. They make all different sizes, but see, these wisps are great for landscape painting, for grasses, and they're great for fur. And I use this brush not only this way against the paper, but I turn it on its side and use it like this to make little fur indentations that way too. It works really well. And I am going to get some clear water in my brush and just paint in the direction of the cat's fur. So you do have to, even though you're just putting water on, you still have to look at your reference photo a lot at this point and paint in the direction of the fur. And I'm just putting lines of water on. And the reason why I want to do that is I want this cat to have some white areas of fur mixed in with the coloration, because if you look at the reference photo, it looks like he's laying in some pretty bright light, and it's creating some white strands of fur to just reflect the light, and they appear to the human eye as white. This cat, like I said, has a lot of gray in his coat, so I'm going to use a lot of ultramarine with a touch of burnt sienna to create that gray, and it's almost a perfect gray for this. This is a little bit of phthalo blue right here, and I don't care if that gets in there. I think that'll be fine, but I'm going to carefully look at my reference photo and look at where it's darkest, which is along here, and this is just kind of me. You see how much texture that gets? Let me see if I can zoom in and you see how it's leaving parts of it. I'm going to blot off my brush a little bit. I'm going to get some of the paint out, and then I'm just going to kind of spread around what I already have on here. You really have to keep looking at your reference, because at least on this cat, the direction of his fur changes a lot. Now, this part of the nose is quite light, and I had some bleed through right there. I don't really want that, so I'll show you how I'm going to fix that little spot that I don't really want. But over here is a lot of gray. You can even go in after you get the paint on like this with some clear water and kind of help merge all this together. I'm using kind of the side-ish part of the brush now, not flat, not completely on the side, but at an angle. And different angles are going to give you different textures. While it's still wet, I'm going to go in with some more burnt sienna to add to this mix, because he's got a lot of brown areas too. He's got some interesting markings, and I'm going to put those in and let them merge with the blue just a little bit. Watch my line. It goes up through here. Really having to look a lot. And there's a line that goes up through here. And the more you can get things to kind of merge together in a watercolor, I think, the better it's going to look. There's an edge of fur that comes here. This will end up being a lot darker. He's got this triangle right here, so that really is an important little detail to get the right shape. And block in this little dark area under. I'll do a lot more work through here later. But this is all kind of that brown color. Okay, now, hopefully I didn't wait too long. I want to just blot out a little bit of his nose here. I want this more of a white. And I'm going to go in with some clear water and push this away. Oops, I must have some brown on my paint brush there. I'm gonna sop this up because I want his nose to be pretty white in this area with a little bit of phthalo, just a little bit. I'm gonna smear that all around, and that's gonna be his brighter nose where the light is hitting his nose. And then this is a lot darker in here. Let me get some more gray on my brush. I'm trying to get as much done while my paper is wet. I'm going to blot more here along this edge. That delineated it very nicely. And I think what I'm going to do next is I'm going to let this dry, and then I'm going to put his little closed eye in, because that's going to help me serve as a roadmap for me to be able to see as I'm painting where I need to put shapes and lines. So that's going to be part of my roadmap. His eye is right there, and I need to get that in there so I don't lose it as I get more paint on the paper, because that is kind of my roadmap. I'm going to work on this little area where everything is perfectly dry right now, and I'm going in with my clear water to create some fur textures that I will then drop some paint into and let them create the effect I'm looking for, which is sunlit fur. A lot of it's very light, and then some of it's very dark. So I'm just gonna go in, and it won't take much paint to finish this area because it's a very light cat. He's got really very light fur. So I want to keep his fur soft. That's why I'm going in with my clear water and just painting along the textures of the fur. Maybe block in some of my darker areas too while I'm at it. This is all in shadow down here. All right, let's drop in some of these fur areas. I'm going to get a little bit more burnt sienna and mostly ultramarine blue, but a touch of burnt sienna because this is very gray blue. It's almost a blue, isn't it, down in here? So, okay, and I'm going to just easy does it here. I'm gonna let it's not gonna take much. I'm just gonna let the watercolor do a lot of the work here. I'm gonna pick up some more burnt sienna in this one little area. And this is in shadow down in here, so eventually this will all be really dark. And I can go ahead and do that now. Ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, mix it together. What have you got? A very pretty gray. So there's that. Try to make sure. I might leave a little white edge along the top of his leg here that's not in the picture as much in the reference, just to have some artistic license to help tell the viewer's eye what they're looking at. Okay, then I'll drop in a few little burnt sienna drops in here, and then this area right here is very delicate fur. It's just barely anything going on. And then I'm going to get a little bit more burnt sienna, and I've got basically a tea consistency of water and paint on my brush. Now this is still wet, so I can still work. He's got like this little bloom of fur in here. It goes, it's like a star of fur. So I'll try to capture that. And it's very subtle coloring on this cat. Less is probably more. Try to zoom in so you guys can see what effect this is having. Some of the edges are really hard because I put that water down, and some, because of that water, are very, very soft. See, now I'm using the tip of my bristles to create these lines. Doesn't take a lot. Paint along his little elbow here. Then he's got a much darker little spot here. I'll just kind of dot that in. And then very cool colored shadow down in here that's also quite wispy. So I'm trying to really use the wisps of my brush to create that effect down in this area. And then I'm going to take my little liner brush and pull all this together down in this area here to create this line along one of the cat's legs. Gotta have a little bit more control in this area. So I can understand what it's looking at. And here comes my cat. She knows that I'm videoing and she wants to be a part of the excitement. All right, so I'm gonna get some darker to delineate this little bit of fur here. And this is really quite dark. But kitty, no kitty, kitty, sorry kitty, kitty, you can't step on my computer. She knows when I have my camera on. She knows, I'm telling you. She was like a little movie starlet in her last life, and she wants to be on camera. Why can't I understand this? Okay, so I'm dropping some dark ultramarine blue, a little bit more milk consistency just along this edge to denote a shadow that is created by this leg that is here. And then it'll bleed up into this area without too much guidance from me, and it'll create a nice gradation from dark along this shadow edge up lighter into the fur up here. That's what I'm hoping anyway. Don't I sound like I know what I'm trying to accomplish? I do know what I'm trying to accomplish. I don't always get there, but okay. Anyway, starting to ramble. No, Rachel. No rambling. Too late. All right, that's really pretty and poetic, I think. Hopefully it'll dry just as pretty as it looks. And you can see how the this particular mix, the ultramarine blue and the burnt sienna, really works great together, because can you see how it's granulating out? I love that. I just think it adds so much interesting texture and character to what would otherwise just be a very simple area. So this is why I love watercolor, you guys. Oil paint doesn't do that. Oil paint doesn't paint itself. You got to do it. But your watercolor, if you just give it enough water and give it a couple of things to work with, like 2 different colors to interact with each other in an area, it'll do something like that. See how it's granulating out as it dries? Love that. And also, here I'll show you another area where the watercolor kind of did its own thing. Up here, I had it very wet. And when the paper is wet enough to create kind of mini currents in the water on top of the paper, as it dries, some of those currents will stay there and create really interesting textures. I couldn't have done that. The watercolor paint did that. It created that current of texture between the fur edge of the cat and this is the background. So you gotta love that about watercolor, when you can get it to work for you like that. All right, now I want to get in some mapping details. And what I mean by that is you can get lost in a painting really fast, especially when you start painting over your original drawing. And so before I lose those drawing details, I'm going to put in this little guy's eyes so I don't lose them. And I might go in later and darken the eyes, but I at least want to get the basic idea of the eye in. And this kitty's eyes, his eyes are closed, so it's not going to be too, this is an easy way to do eyes. Just have them closed, right? Is that cheating? But all right, now I won't lose his eye because I know where it is. And I like to put in, sometimes I like to map in the very darkest parts of the cat's face, just so that they kind of serve as guidelines for where the main areas of my composition are. And it can be quite helpful. So I'm going to do that with his little nose too, because he has some very dark areas in his nose, and I've got the right color mixed up on my palette already. I was painting rocks in my other commission, and so it's a pretty little curve. Let me try to get that here. And then this pretty little line here goes right up against this other guy's. This rigger has a little bit too much movement in it. I'm going to switch to my little Simply Simmons brush that holds it's a little bit stronger of a brush. the bristles don't bend as much when I touch them to the paper. So I kind of need that. And this has a little sweet little, almost trying to look closely at the shapes. I should probably have my glasses on for this, but oh well. And then there's a really subtle line across here where that's the skin area of his nose. So I'll just get that in. Just kind of dotting to create kind of a fur texture here. All right, I've got my Simply Simmons brush here. It's a size 0 script brush, so you can use whatever brush that you have that has a really good point on it. I'm doing the ear, so I'll be making some ear textures. So you could also use, if you have a silver black velvet liner or a script brush, that would work really well. And right now I'm just getting the ear area wet where I want to apply water, and I'm going to use the same color combination I've been using, which is mostly ultramarine on this bluish cat with a little bit of burnt sienna mixed in to create a gray. And I'm just painting along this ear and getting it ready for paint. And then I'm just gonna pick up some mix on my palette. Like I said, when I was painting this, I was also working on rocks in my other painting. So I had a lot of gray and that's always, almost always for me, gonna be burnt sienna and an ultramarine blue. A little bit of cerulean in the mix for this cat I think would be pretty. And I'm just going in and kind of dropping that paint into the moist areas that I've already created, and being careful to look at my reference photo and make sure that I'm painting in the same direction and length of hair that is in the ear in this area. I'm using about milk consistency paint in this ear here. And of course, you know, if you want a darker area, make it more cream consistency. If you want it lighter, make it more tea consistency, meaning the more water you add to your paint, the lighter your paint will get. The less water you have in your brush and the more paint you have in your brush, the darker the color will be. Hello, kitty. Hi. She's not impressed. And then as the ear develops, you can see I go in with darker and darker paint while the area is still wet, so it all kind of merges and blends together. And you can also see where I've got my masking. The edges of this cat's ear are really dark, so I go in with a lot darker paint, a lot thicker paint. Now you can see I have more burnt sienna in the mix. This is a warmer color, or more yellow, which is, for me, burnt sienna. I added burnt sienna to my mix here to get this more brown color. And what I'm basically doing here is painting the darker fur of that other cat that is up against the ear of the lilac cat. All right, I've got a little bit more burnt sienna in the mix now, and I'm doing the really dark area of the cat's ear. And make sure when you paint this ear, you get the darks really dark. Now, I've said this in a lot of videos, especially recently, and it's kind of like the eye. Ears have light areas, very, very light areas, not always white areas. It just depends on the cat. This cat does have some bright white areas, mediums and darks, lights, mediums, and darks in the ear. So make sure you get that variety of color. And it'll be hard to do that if you're not using good paper. So remember to use that good paper. I always use Arches Cold Press 140 pound, but I'm getting those darks very dark in this area. And carefully painting negatively around those wisps of fur that come up from the cheek area into the ear. A lot of times I'll paint those little furs there near the ear of the cat's face. I'll do negative painting, which means I paint around the long furs coming up from the cheek. And here I'm doing a little bit of mapping in and just putting in the main structures of the face down here closer to the eye area, just so that I make sure that I keep track of where the edge of this cat's face is. I'm putting in a really dark where the two cats meet. There's a really dark shadow, so I'm going ahead and putting that in, and that'll also help me later when I'm painting the more subtle areas of this face. It'll help me keep track of where I am in the painting. Do you do that? Do you get lost in paintings? I do. That's why I always have to map out the basic structures first when I start a painting. As that ear dries, I go back in and add refinements. As an area dries and you see that it needs more dark, you can do that. Just make sure that there's less water on your brush than there is on the paper so that you don't get cauliflowers. And sometimes that's the best time to rework an area, is to go back before it's completely dry, when it's still a little moist and you can still get soft gradations, and go back and put darker paint in those areas so it'll still kind of merge, but it'll also hold your shape of whatever you just painted, in this case, cat fur. All right, you guys, that's the end of half of the lilac cat, and in the next session we will finish this lilac cat up and call this done. And remember, for the background, I've already done a couple videos on how I did the background in my stripes video on YouTube, and you can see it there. So I will see you in the next session. Bye, you guys.